You may ask, how did this tradition get started? I'll tell you. I don't know.
Today we're going to try and give some power rankings to the traditions in Stellaris. To do that, we are going to build a tier list. Now, I have seen the tier list, I've constructed this tier list, and I know what's coming up, so I can say without a doubt that some of you are going to be massively and completely offended at the positions of certain traditions. Just like ethics, I think traditions hold a very special place in many people's hearts, and we do form something of an attachment to certain traditions in this game. For the longest time, expansion was one of my favourite traditions, and it was an auto pick for my first tradition. It is also very important to remember that the order you pick your traditions in and what time it is in the game that you pick these traditions does change how powerful they are. For this list, I'm going to assume you have picked this tradition at basically the best time, though I will indicate when I think roughly that time should be, early on in the traditions, in the middle, or right near the end. Now don't forget, we only get 7 different tradition slots, so no matter how many traditions we want to pick, and there are 13 different traditions to pick between, we can only pick 7. So these tradition trees are a finite and precious resource. Without any further ado, let's dive into the bottom of the tier list and see what the F tier has to offer. First up, we have the expansion tradition. I did say, don't forget that this used to be one of my favourite traditions, and from a thematic and roleplay sense, I do rather like it. Now, what are the issues with this tradition? First off, the later you pick it, the worse it is, and that's because of the specific bonuses it's going to give you. So let's look into what the abilities and effects of the expansion tradition are. The opening effect is not that fantastic. You get a plus 25% colony development speed. Once you get a few technologies and you're in the mid-game, that's going to be completely drowned out by your other technological bonuses, getting plus 50% in 2 separate technologies. Following that, the right-hand side of the tree is rather nice. Every time a colony is established, we get plus 1 pops, and also we can get either plus 10% pop growth speed, or if we are a machine intelligence, plus 10% pop assembly speed. Those two are without a doubt the best bonuses in this tree because pop growth is very important in this game. The more pops you have, the larger your economy will be, and thus the more things you can do, because a big economy lets you have big research incomes and big fleets, and that then lets you exercise your willpower on the universe. While the plus 10% growth speed or assembly will help you throughout the game, it isn't that much. We have a couple of technologies that will provide this and some other things as well. The plus 1 extra pops when establishing colonies is better the earlier you can get this. If you can get this before you've established a colony, you're going to get plus 1 extra pops on every single colony you ever found. Now, depending on the galaxy size you're playing, from tiny all the way up to huge, you're probably going to establish somewhere in the region of 10 up to maybe 100 colonies. That means this bonus throughout its lifetime will have a utility of 10 to 100 pops, which does make it somewhat similar to a plus 10 or plus 20% pop assembly speed over about 100 years. From here though, things start to go a little downhill. On the left hand side, we've got some bonuses that I don't think are very useful most of the time. They are minor impact if anything. Minus 10% influence cost to star bases, that's nice, but not fantastic. Minus 20% starbase upkeep, that's going to allow you to go at least 1 extra over your starbase cap without feeling it that much, which is nice, yet still not something massive. I would basically read that one as plus 1 starbase limit. And then on the left hand side, we've got minus 25% empire size from systems and colonies. If you're a void dweller, you're probably going to have lots and lots of colonies, so that's a little better. But the overall bonus here is going to be a minor impact on your research speed as you play this game, and that's nothing to write home about. The finisher is plus 1 max districts for all non-artificial planets, and if you're a void dweller, minus 20% habitat build cost instead, which is rather good. As a void dweller, I believe expansion is probably up a tier in the C tier because of the bonuses we're going to be getting here. Though for everyone else, I do think it deserves its place down here in the F tier, and let me explain why. So, You are only really getting two majorly useful bonuses from this, the +1 pops when establishing a colony and plus 10% pop growth speed. And even then, it's not that overwhelming, and there are much better and much more interesting bonuses we can get from other traditions. A lot of times these days, I might take expansion and only take the first two tradition picks on the right-hand column without actually completing it, and that means I'm not getting an extra ascension perk, which is really annoying. I think the fact that we've got expansion down here in the bottom does rather indicate that all of the traditions have some merit, and that basically means that even though we are here in the F tier, it is still a good tradition to pick, and there are bonuses to having it. Versatility is a tradition only available to machine intelligence empires, and I actually think this is possibly the worst tradition in the entire game. What does it do? Well, the opener is minus 10% pop assembly cost, which is really neither here nor there. Then on the right hand side we have minus 10% pop housing usage. As a machine empire, you're really not going to notice that. Minus 5% job upkeep, which is kind of okay, but really not that much. And then minus 33% resettlement costs. Again, something that is slightly useful, but overall you could completely ignore all of these bonuses in the game because they're not really going to have a massive impact. On the left hand side, we're going to get plus 50 trust cap from machine intelligence empires. If you're playing in a rather large galaxy, you're not going to be surrounded by a majority machine intelligence empires, so that's pretty useless. Plus 1 available envoys is okay, that's kind of nice. We do like having extra envoys, especially now in Overlord with lots of vassals and subjects. So that is the one redeeming feature, I believe, of this entire tree. And then finally, minus 10% market fee. That last market fee change is also okay. As a machine intelligence, you're going to find it hard to get other market fee reductions because you won't have access to the mercantile tradition. But yes, as I've said, overall, none of these bonuses are really very useful. It needs, I think, a big rework for it to be properly useful to any machine intelligence player outside of some roleplay and thematics. The finisher effect here is that you get a 50% refund per demolished building or district. If you're playing correctly, you're probably not going to demolish any buildings or districts unless you invade other worlds, so really that's possibly completely irrelevant. I believe without a doubt that this is the worst tradition in the game. And if you're enjoying this video, please use the like button, as is tradition here on YouTube. Adaptability in many ways is the worse and lower performing cousin than expansion. It basically deals with the expansion of your empire, but in a different way. The opener here is minus 10% pop housing usage. Then on the right hand side, we're going to get a nice juicy 10% habitability, which is good, unless you've done something like synthetically ascend, at which point that's completely useless, or you have genetic biological ascension, so you're probably going to be able to change your habitability to have 100% habitability on every world once you've got some of those technologies stacking. Below that we have adaptive ecology, plus 1 building slots on all planets. As a void dweller, that is actually quite a bit nicer than a regular empire, because a regular empire can quite easily fill up all their building slots on the planet. So as a void dweller, I would possibly push this up into the C tier just for this plus 1 building slots, but even then it's still not that fantastic. And then you've got minus 10% resettlement cost, which is much worse than the equivalent pick in versatility, which is minus 33%. Then on the left hand side we get plus 10% monthly food, which is kind of okay, but really I believe pretty useless. If you're a lithoid, instead you get a 15% refund per demolished building, which is kind of weird and again not massively useful. You're probably not going to be demolishing that many buildings. The really good part of this one is on the bottom left you get survival of the fittest, minus 25% orbital bombardment damage and plus 25% defense army damage. If you want to build maximum defense fortress worlds and you're not something like subterranean, you can stack this bonus with a shield generator and another bonus to quite easily get up to the maximum reduction of orbital bombardment damage, which is 98%. The finisher here is that you unlock the planetary prospecting decision, which is a nice and fine decision sometimes because it might give you the ability to build an extra district of a specific type that you want, and in really, really good cases, you're actually going to end up getting something like a rare resource deposit. But overall, this is something, if you're going to take it, I really think you need to take this as possibly the second or third tradition pick, because quite quickly the +1 building slot and extra habitability is going to be completely useless. On the other hand, if you're in a defensive situation, I would also possibly pick this tree just for survival of the fittest and that extra bombardment damage reduction, because it can be completely laughable when an enemy simply cannot attack your world and is forced to crack them instead. Alright, now we're in the C tier. Everything in this tier generally, and I think quite interestingly, can be picked in the mid game or even the late game, so you could pick it from perk numbers 3 all the way through to 7 and you'd still be getting some reasonable bonuses from it. More specifically, the finishing bonuses to some of these are even better the later on we are in the game. So let's see what we're working with. Domination is a tradition that has received quite a bit of love and attention in the last few patches. Now there are some real merits for taking this tradition. The opener here is minus 33% clear blocker cost, and if you're a Void Dweller, minus 20% habitat upkeep instead, which is nice, but it's really just going to be saving you a couple of alloys. The clear blocker cost here is a bonus that is better the later on you get it, as long as you don't get it too late. If you're getting this, I think somewhere in the region of 30 to 60 years into the game, when you've started filling up most of your worlds, and now you're going to be clearing a lot of those blockers to unlock extra district slots, it can be pretty useful. On the right hand side we have Public Trust Officers or Judgment Corps, and if you are a hive mind or machine intelligence it's called something else again. Basically you're going to be getting +1 unity per enforcer, and you'll also unlock the Enhanced Surveillance Edict, which to be quite honest is not an edict I think you'd like to run. And for Gestalt Consciousness you're going to get minus 10 deviancy on all colonies, which is okay. Overall this isn't that fantastic a tradition though. You do usually want to minimize the number of enforcers on your worlds, so giving them just +1 unity isn't a very useful thing to do. Below that we have Workplace Motivators. That's going to give a nice 5% resource output to workers and slaves and unlock the Extended Shift Edict. Extended Shift is slightly nicer than Enhanced Surveillance, but that happiness and minus you're going to be getting from it isn't that good overall. On the left hand side we're going to get Colonial Viceroys. That's going to give us +2 governor level cap and plus 0.5 monthly influence. The extra influence is actually quite useful now I think with the Overlord expansion. I tend to find that I'm consistently running low on influence, and this can be rather nice. The leader level cap here is alright, though nothing amazing. On the right hand side we're going to get a little bit of extra housing from our upgraded capital buildings and all housing buildings, which is kind of okay, but generally speaking this is going to be somewhere in the region of +1 or 2 housing per world, which isn't really that great. Machine Intelligences will also get a minus 25% empire size from districts, which is something rather better, though this one is only useful in the mid to late game. Below that we get a nice juicy +50 edict fund, as well as some extra ruler level cap, and it can be quite difficult to actually get increases to your ruler level cap, so that is something that's nice, especially if you have immortal rulers. The edict fund is also really, I think, quite good, especially in the early to mid game. Later on, as your empire size increases and your edicts spiral out of control in terms of their cost, it becomes something of an irrelevance, but early in the game I actually think extra edict fund is very powerful. The finisher on this one is that you'll get a minus 10% empire size from pops, and as pops are the main contributor to empire size in any empire, and thus the penalties we're going to be getting for technology and tradition cost, extra reduction to empire size from pops is nothing to ignore. We also get the ability to create a hegemony federation if we have the Federations DLC enabled, and we also taken the prerequisite traditions in diplomacy. I do believe that's rather good because hegemony is one of the best federation types in Stellaris. Overall, the reason why this is higher up than something like expansion or adaptability is we're going to be getting quite a lot of bonuses that will help us no matter what point we are at in the game. And the opportunity cost, if we take something like expansion or adaptability first, is rather high because there are other better traditions that I think could take up our first, second or third tradition slots. If you're enjoying this video and the other videos on this channel, you can help to support this channel by becoming a member on Patreon, becoming a member of this channel on YouTube, giving a super thanks down in the comment section below, or purchasing something from the Humble Bundle store. Links to Humble Bundle and Patreon are down in the description below. Next we have the Harmony tradition. Harmony in a lot of ways is very similar to Domination. Just like Domination, I believe this is a tradition you want to take somewhere in the region of 3 to 7. You can take this at any time and it will benefit your empire in some way, though some benefits are much better suited to the mid-game. The opener here is that you get minus 10% food upkeep and minus 10% pop minerals upkeep. That isn't an amazing bonus, but it is okay when you're looking at it from the perspective of trying to keep your food production to an absolute minimum. On the right hand side here we get some bonuses to Governing Ethics Attraction, which is alright, and then Utopian Dream, which is really good, that gives +5 stability on all colonies. It's a bit like the Worker Motivation because this is going to give 3% resource output from jobs, but for every single job type on every planet in our empire. Stability bonuses are definitely something you should not ignore, and you should try to collect them wherever you can. On the left hand side here, we've got a bonus which is reasonably good if you're a spiritualist empire and or are planning on psionically ascending, because you won't be getting any leader lifespan extensions due to synthetically ascending or getting some sort of genetic ascension, so plus 20 years leader lifespan can be rather useful, especially in the mid game if you're trying to keep your leaders alive just that little bit longer. On the right hand side we get minus 75% pop demotion time, which is alright but nothing massive. There's also a nice little extra bonus here. If you are shared burdens, your leaders will get minus 20% leader upkeep instead, which can be very cool if you're going for a shared burden merchant run. Below that we get Harmonious Directives that gives us plus 50 Edict Fund, and again, like the Edict Fund bonus we had earlier, I think this is quite nice in the mid game. The finisher here is minus 10% empire size from pops, which is good for exactly the same reason it is good in the Domination tradition, but we don't unlock any special federations that can be set up either. For that reason I think it's slightly weaker than Domination, though that lovely stability bonus is not something I can ignore. Next up is something of an interesting one. We've actually got the Subterfuge tradition tree. Now, I know that some of you, and I myself included here, have thought the Subterfuge tradition tree was the worst thing. It was the biggest piece of hot garbage we've ever had in Stellaris, and basically you would never try to pick it unless you were memeing. Well, I think that has changed somewhat, and that's because they've given 2 fantastic military bonuses now in the Subterfuge tree. So first up we're going to get a whole host of bonuses that help us with our espionage missions. The opener here is +1 code breaking, then on the left we get information security, +1 encryption, and +5 chance to evade. Now this increased chance to evade is actually very special. This is one of the only modifiers in the game that increases the base chance to evade rather than just giving you a percentage increase like 5 or 10%. That makes this really powerful, especially for destroyers. It is going to make it much easier for you to get a destroyer to maximum evasion with this. And actually for that reason, from a military standpoint, I would rate Subterfuge in possibly the A tier if you're only looking at it from just the military benefits, because it is a necessity for getting that high evasion. On the other side, we've also got +1 code breaking and +1 operational skill, which is okay, and then an extra +10 tracking. That tracking is going to make your battleships very good at taking down targets they wouldn't otherwise be very good at fighting. That is the high evasion ships like corvettes and destroyers. So overall here, there are some fantastic military benefits. The rest of the tree is kind of a bit meh. You get some extra hostile operation difficulty, plus 20% hostile operation infiltration required, double agents plus 10 intel per failed hostile operation, plus 1 available envoys, which is nice if you're doing the espionage missions, and plus 10 maximum infiltration level, and finally plus 50% infiltration speed. The finisher effect here is plus 50% infiltration level refund for successful operations. At the moment, as espionage isn't very important and isn't very useful outside of a few niche uses, that is why this subterfuge prestige tree is so low down. I do think the military benefits do bring it up here, and that's why it's not down in the F tier, but actually here in the C tier. And just from a military perspective, as I've already said, it could even be in the A tier because of how necessary it is for certain strategies. I want to put a caveat here because we do know the Custodian team are working on espionage and espionage operations, and that could mean that this subterfuge tradition tree does boost its rankings if espionage becomes more relevant in the base game. Now we're at the B tier. As you can see from what we've gone through so far, every tradition is useful in its own individual way, even subterfuge these days, but some traditions are much more useful and much more important for you than others. Even those in the F tier are still good bonuses to have, but we're now in the B tier, so let's find out what I think is the middle of the pack. Mercantile is a new tradition that we had with the 3.1 LEM release. This tradition offers fantastic bonuses for regular biological empires. That means you can't be a hive mind or machine intelligence to take this, and all of the bonuses here, pretty much all of them, are useful to an empire that is focusing on trade. For that reason, I think you need to take this policy either first, second, possibly third if you really are going to take it third, but the earlier you get it, the better, because what you're going to want to do with it is focus your entire economy on merchants. Merchants are going to be producing your energy and then also either consumer goods, which I would probably recommend if you're just going for the regular trade policy, the consumer benefits policy, or marketplace of ideas, and they'll be producing unity as well. But if you do go for this kind of setup, you are not going to be going down the energy production path. You probably won't even want to take the extra technologies that would improve your technicians' potential output. And that means that it is kind of a do or don't with this one. If you spec into this one halfway through at around the third tradition, I would expect you're doing that so that you can put out something like a trade habitat, as habitats can have lots and lots of trade value quite easily, and that can be a nice way to get it by using this mercantile tradition. But other than that, value for a regular empire, you'll either want to take this, as I've said, early on or possibly not at all. But what does it actually do? Well, to start off with, it gives you +5 trade protection and +1 collection range from all of your star bases. That's kind of a nice starter, but it doesn't really do that much overall. On the right hand side, we have the adaptive economic policies. So this will unlock the consumer benefits trade policy and the marketplace of ideas trade policy if you're not in a trade league federation. And we'll get to a trade league federation in just a moment. But those two policies are quite good because it allows you to split your trade value income from being just energy credits into either consumer goods or also some unity. Marketplace of Ideas has been nerfed slightly in the present time, so it isn't really as good as the consumer benefits, but that's beside the point. After that, you get a nice +10% boost to trade value, and on the right hand side, -10% market fee. The trade value boost is rather nice. We can stack up lots of trade value modifiers, including this modifier from Mercantile, to really get some crazy bonuses to our trade value production on our planets. And let's not forget that not just pops producing trade value make trade value. Every single pop in your empire, even if it's doing anything from being unemployed to any job, will be producing passive trade value on your planets as well. On the left side, we get the hilariously named Trickle Up Economics. That gives you +1 trade value per clerk, and I wouldn't actually see that you should have much benefit here, because if you're running for a trade-based empire, you will probably want to use the benefit of the next one, and that is commercial enterprises, giving you +1 merchants for commercial zones, as well as commercial segments and trade district. That's on habitats and ring worlds. So you do want to spam merchants rather than actually using clerks, because you're going to get so much more trade value out of a merchant that I would say it is much better, and therefore Trickle Up Economics becomes pretty pointless. The finisher here is +10% trade value, which is good, don't get me wrong, but then we also have the ability to create a trade league federation if we have Federations DLC and we unlock the prerequisite diplomacy tradition. Now, that means we get access to what I would say is arguably the strongest federation in the game, and that is the Trade League Federation. Why is it the strongest? Well, Trade League Federation allows you to have the Trade League Trade Policy, which gives you half an energy credit, 0.25 consumer goods, and 0.125 unity for every trade value. Basically, it wraps up the benefits from consumer benefits and marketplace of ideas, and now you get them in a single trade policy. It is incredibly overpowered. The reason I haven't got this tradition tree higher up is that, as I've said, you do have to spec into this early, and if you go down this route, you're basically going to be ignoring creating energy from something like technicians, and that means in the mid to late game, you're actually going to end up not having as much trade value because you're able to ramp up the energy output from technicians significantly better than you can from merchants and trade value, so it isn't that powerful in the long run from specifically that perspective, which is an energy production perspective. But what do you think about this tier list so far? Would you put things in a different order? Please let me know down in the comments below. For the first few hours after this video goes live, if you have anything you want to tell me, anything you want to write down in that comment, I will be checking out the comment section and trying to respond to as many comments as I can. The diplomacy tradition has one major bonus, and that is the fact that this is the only way you can form your own federation in Stellaris. When you unlock the diplomacy tradition, if you take the first pick on the left in this tradition tree, you will get the Federation, and that gives you +1 available envoys and gives you the ability to create federations. Now, you will start with only the basic type, the Galactic Union, as well as any others you may have unlocked through ethics, unless you've also unlocked some of the other traditions, and they unlock the other federation types as well. I would recommend that if you're going to take diplomacy, you probably want to take this as your second, at the very latest your third pick, so that you can form a federation in a reasonable amount of time. If you don't form a federation early enough, you will never get to those higher levels of experience, and therefore you won't be receiving all of the benefits from actually having a federation. Now, this becomes completely irrelevant if you can convince another empire to let you join their federation, at which point you completely do not need diplomacy. And if you are in that situation, I would rank this one down in basically in the F tier actually, depending on exactly what you're using it for. So what are the bonuses? Okay, the starter here is you get -50% diplomatic influence cost. If you're a player that likes to trade with the AI and have lots of agreements with other empires, this will be very helpful for you, as diplomacy and diplomatic pacts now eat up quite a lot of precious influence that we need for things like vassal contract negotiation. It also unlocks the diplomatic grants edict, which will be very useful in things like the galactic community, because you can fire that one off for just a few months to get the extra bonuses to your diplomatic weight, as well as the extra envoy to increase your diplo weight in the Senate, and then cancel it almost immediately, and that will only cost you a tiny amount of unity to get one of the special votes that you need passed. So that is a really good edict from a galactic politics perspective. With the left tree, I've already talked about Federation. Below that, we have the Entente Coordination, which gives you +100% Federation naval capacity contribution. This doesn't reduce your naval cap any more than currently, and will double the amount that you contribute to the Federation. Therefore, you will reach the cap, which is 200, 400, or 600 naval capacity, I think, off the top of my head. I may be wrong, someone correct me down in the comments if I am, but you will reach those caps much easier. Once you've got to that cap, though, it isn't really very relevant. On the right hand side, we're going to get nice unity bonuses for every embassy, and if you are a diplomatically inclined federation, this could be rather nice in a very large galaxy, but overall you're never really going to get more than 40 or 50 unity from this, even if you have, 10, 15, 20 different embassies. Below that, we have direct diplomacy, increasing our trust cap and increasing our trust growth, which is only useful if you're doing diplomacy with AI empires. And on the right, we get +5 to our diplomatic acceptance, which is nice, but not very useful in things like vassal contract negotiations, and a 1% monthly chance to gain a favor per improve relations action. This can be quite nice in a multiplayer game. If you are trying to beat another player in the galactic community, you can start improving relations with them and eat up favors that way. The finisher here gives you a nice 10% diplomatic weight and +1 available envoys. If you don't like doing galactic politics, if you don't like voting in the Senate, and if you don't want to form a federation though, this tree is almost certainly pretty useless and would go down in the F tier dependent on playstyle. Personally, I think it does sit here right in the middle of the pack, but as I've said, you must complete this or start it as your second, possibly third tradition. Alright, now we are at the A tier. things can be in the A tier for a couple of reasons. Either they are basically an auto pick very early on, possibly even your first tradition, to get your hand on a bonus that is going to be very helpful throughout the game, or they are just such a solid choice that you will probably want to pick them first, second, or third in a lot of your games. But even if you don't, they'll probably offer you some good bonuses no matter what point in the game you pick them. Unyielding is a new tradition we've had since the 3.1 LEM release. This one is available if you have either the Apocalypse DLC or the new Overlord DLC. Its starting ability, its starting bonus is that you get +2 starbase capacity and a massive +50% starbase upgrade speed. That is one of the best starting bonuses we've seen so far in this list. We then have two tracks. The right hand side deals with starbases specifically and either upgrades them, reduces the cost of building them, or lets you build more of them. And the left hand side primarily focuses on our planets and our economy. On the right, we're going to get +33% starbase hull points, +33% starbase damage, +33% defense platform damage, and +33 defense platform hull points. Some absolutely fantastic bonuses from a defensive perspective, as well, you might know if you've recently seen my video on orbital rings, but we can build up some very fearsome defenses that have fantastic range and can outrange fleets in the mid and late game. Star bases are now possibly useful, though they are still very static defensive structures. Below that, we'll get +2 starbase capacity for a total of +4 from this tradition tree, which is rather nice, -50% starbase upgrade cost, which is a massive saving in alloys. If you take this as your second or third tradition and you unlock this pick early, you're going to be getting massive reductions as you upgrade from starholds to fortresses all the way up to citadels. The final one here, +4 hostile operation difficulty for starbase sabotage, is okay, but not really that great. On the left hand side, we're going to be getting bonuses to defense army health, +3 unity per fortress, and +0.5 unity per defensive army. That should equate to a total of +6 unity per fortress. We should, however, I believe they are going to patch out the +3 unity per fortress, so it should end up being just +3 unity per defensive army, but at the moment it is really good from a unity perspective. Below that, we get -25% orbital bombardment damage, which, if we pair with adaptability and a planetary shield generator, lets us cap out our orbital bombardment reduction at the massive 98%, meaning most of your planets will feel a slight tickle as the enemy bombards them from orbit. We'll also get a -25% war exhaustion reduction, which is very good for regular biological empires, and for hive minds is laughable when stacked with their other war exhaustion reductions, because you can basically be in a situation as a hive mind who isn't the crisis where no one will be able to force you to peace out, and that is very powerful. +25% hostile claim influence cost increase will mean that it always costs some influence for another empire to make claims on your systems. The last pick here is Bulwark of Harmony, which moved over from the old Harmony tradition tree. This gives a nice +15% fire rate in your own borders, which is very good for defensive structures, as they will always be inside of your empire, and +33% ship build speed while in defensive wars. When we stack that with our defense platform costs, that should mean you can build defense platforms in very short time at all at a very low cost. The finisher effect is alright as well. We get +50% defense platform cap, which will stack with other modifiers and multiply the defense platform cap increases we're going to get from something like the Eternal Vigilance Ascension perk. We're also going to get -20% starbase upkeep, which is rather nice. That basically will equate to getting +1 extra starbase capacity. So we've kind of got a soft starbase increase here of +5. We can also create the Martial Alliance, which isn't the best federation, but it's still one of the nice federations, better than a regular Galactic Union. And if we are a tier 3 Bulwark, we will get -0.5 hostile ship daily hull regen reduction in all of our systems. Overall, this is a fantastic tradition tree that offers phenomenal bonuses. The reason that it is not in the S tier but down here in the A tier is that in order to exercise your will on the universe, you must have a proper fleet in order to attack and be aggressive. You can turtle up with this in a very effective manner, but you will always need regular ships that can move around and defend you rather than just having static defenses. And for that reason, it does sit down here in the A tier. Though you can take it from anything from your 2nd tradition all the way up to your 7th slot, and the bonuses will always help. Discovery is an interesting tradition that, by the time you reach the mid-game, about half of the bonuses here are going to be completely useless and completely pointless. However, that is still offset by the fact we get some great bonuses that will last throughout the game and help us, hence why we're here in the A tier. I know some of you may be upset and want this to be placed all the way up in the S tier, but I really don't feel it can go up there. Now, this is a tradition that you probably want to pick 1st, 2nd, or 3rd. That way you're going to get the maximum bonus from it, and that is because the opener here for our abilities is plus 20% anomaly research speed, and you will unlock the Map the Stars Edict, which increases your survey speed and increases the chance you'll actually find anomalies. However, both of these are completely useless by the time you're deep in the mid-game and every star system has been surveyed and you've also completed all of those anomalies. On the left hand side we get the weaker of the two sides, I would say. We get To Boldly Go, which gives us extra survey speed and plus 50% science ship disengage chance, again useless by the mid game. Below that we get very nice databank uplinks, plus 20% research station output, plus 20% research from star-based buildings, and we'll also unlock the Research Subsidies Edict, which is a nice edict that gives us plus 10% research output from jobs, as long as we get an extra plus 1 energy upkeep. So it is a rather expensive edict for what will be a small bonus by the mid to late game, because that is only an additive percentage modifier on top of all of the other bonuses we're going to be getting for our researcher jobs, but it is still something. On the right hand side we get Science Division, which is really very powerful early on if you take this. If you take this possibly as your 2nd tradition, plus 1 research alternatives is phenomenally useful in going down specific tech paths, and we'll also get plus 2 scientist level cap. Below that we get plus 25% leader experience gain and plus 1 leader level cap, which is a nice bonus to have as long as we are not getting it from something like a civic. Having it from a tradition like this is rather useful as the opportunity cost is very low. The final part is Faith in Science, which gives a whopping 20% researcher upkeep reduction, which will help you as a robot in energy credits, as a hive mind in minerals, and as a regular empire it will cut your consumer goods use dramatically, because you should have lots and lots of researchers, and each researcher takes a base of 2 consumer goods as upkeep, which is quite a lot. If all of that wasn't enough, as the finisher you get a whopping plus 10% research speed boost, which is equivalent to an entire Ascension perk. We also get the Research Cooperative Federation unlocked if we've completed the prerequisite Diplomacy tradition and we have Federation enabled, and if you're Scholarium Tier 3 you get plus 1000 research points in all of your research caches, which is also pretty good. Basically, you want to take this one pretty early on because half of this will not be useful by the time you get to the mid and late game, and by the mid to late game the bonuses here to research speed, the increased research alternatives, and the other bonuses like that aren't going to be as useful relative to the other bonuses you already have from things like your technologies. Okay, wow, this tier list has ended up being absolutely massive. It is really long. We're over 38 minutes, or sorry, just under 38 minutes into this video now. So this is it. This is the call out. If you're still with me and you'd like to let me know that, let me know down in the comments below if you've actually watched this far into the video. You may be a little confused that synchronicity is all the way up here in the A tier. Now, that is specifically for hive minds. Synchronicity is a tradition tree that focuses on your Gestalt empires. It is basically the equivalent of Harmony, but for those empires. The reason it's up here in the A tier is that we get a fantastic bonuses for hive minds. For machine intelligences, I would rank this somewhere down in the C tier next to regular Harmony, but let's dive in and see what these bonuses are. So we get a minus 10% pop upkeep, which is pretty nice, and then on the right hand side we get plus 30% automatic resettlement chance and if you're a hive mind, +2 amenities from Synapse drones. That means if you take this as your first pick, and I would actually strongly recommend as a hive mind you take Synchronicity to go down this integrated preservation path on the right to start with, before possibly moving away into another tradition tree, you will get 2 amenities on each of your Unity worker jobs, and that should enable you, if you build a couple of extra Unity workers, to completely get rid of maintenance drones. Yes, that's right, you should be able to get rid of maintenance drones, the scourge of Hivemind empires, and I believe that is phenomenally powerful. Otherwise, here we get +5 stability on colonies, very nice, increased leader lifespan, reduced leader upkeep, +50 edict fund, and the finisher is that we get -10% empire size from pops, so it's basically equivalent here to Harmony. But that massive bonus to +2 amenities from Synapse drones cannot be overlooked, and in my opinion is essential to getting a good economic start as a Hivemind empire. And for that reason, I think it sits comfortably here in the A tier due to its necessity. Okay, so you've stuck with me so far, and we are now about to reveal what is at the very top of the table in my opinion. What do we have in the S tier as far as it goes for traditions? These are without a doubt what I would say are auto picks for your first and second and possibly third, depending on what else you might want to fit in around them, traditions. I almost certainly start off the game with one of these as my first and go for one of the others as my second, unless I'm playing some weird and wacky builds. Generally speaking, I would take prosperity as my first tradition in almost every game, regardless of the empire type, and that's because it enables you to boost the economy on every single planet in your empire for the entire game. What does it do? You're going to get a nice +20% mining station output to start with, which is alright, but nothing too special. Then on the right hand side, we're going to get prefabricated buildings, which gives us -10% building and district build cost and +25% planetary build speed. That's the equivalent of having the architectural interest governor with some extra bonuses, so that is really good right off the gate. If we stack these build and district build cost reductions with other similar reductions, we can get very cheap districts on our planets, and that is really helpful in the early game for ramping up your economy. Below that, we get a +1 housing per city Hive or Nexus district, which is kind of alright but not massive, and Void Dwellers get a lovely +1 building slot for orbital habitats, and that is very good as well. And if we look at the left side, we have administrative operations, -10% building and district cost. This is going to get better and better the longer you're playing the game as your building and district costs balloon. Below this, we get a lovely 5% bonus to specialists and or complex drone output, which is one of the few bonuses we can actually get in the game to increase our specialist output, and for that reason it is very good. It is going to be increasing the output of your researchers, your alloy producers, and your other specialists granted, but those two are the main focuses here. On the right of this, we'll get some extra clerk jobs from city and habitat trade districts, which isn't that great really, as you don't want to be using these clerks, and if you're a Gestalt consciousness, you'll actually get a bit better here and have +5% monthly energy credits instead. But all of that is okay, pretty good, and then we get to the finisher. +5% resources from jobs and +5 stability on all colonies. This is basically a +8% production boost for every single worker on every planet in your empire. It is without a doubt one of the best traditions you can have in the entire game. It is equivalent to having specific traits or specific civics, but they affect every single worker and every single specialist and every single producing member of your empire. It is mind-bogglingly good. The other tradition up here in the S tier is Supremacy. Now, this one will be improving not just your military might, but actually will also increase your diplomatic weight and diplomatic standing, because if you can build a bigger fleet, you'll be seen as more of a threat to other neighboring empires around you, and they'll be more afraid of you. And if that fleet is also more powerful, that helps with those bonuses as well. I would almost never recommend you pick this first. I'd recommend you go for something like Prosperity to start with for an economic boost in those early years, and then when you unlock this around year 10 to 15, then start diving into it as your second tradition. But at any point in the game, if you pick this tradition, it will help increase your military might. The opener here is pretty nice. We're going to get plus 20 naval capacity flat, which will stack with any other naval capacity increase modifiers, and that does help. We also get plus 20% army damage, which is not that great. On the right hand side, we'll have overwhelming force, plus 10% ship fire rate, and plus 20% orbital bombardment damage. That can help by reducing the orbital bombardment damage reduction of your enemy's worlds, and therefore, even if they think they're capped out at 98%, they could actually be on something like 80%. They will need to take more traditions and stack other bombardment modifiers to be able to actually deal with your fleets, because dealing 20% bombardment damage is 10 times better than dealing 2%. It is a phenomenal increase, and you cannot ignore that. Below that, we get the Great Game, which will increase your damage against star bases, and in this patch, that's actually quite relevant now. On the left hand side, we'll get some great bonuses for your fleet production. Minus 10% ship build cost and plus 25% ship build speed, minus 10% ship upkeep, and plus 20% naval capacity, which will stack with that other plus 20 naval capacity we got right at the start. And then finally, plus 20 fleet command limit and plus 2 admiral level cap. That will allow you to get up to a high enough fleet command limit to unlock the ability to form private military companies, yes, mercenary enclaves, and that's quite nice, along with the extra leader level cap. So overall, all of these bonuses will increase the amount of ships you can put into the field, and that will help you fight the enemy. Those ships will fight harder, and that will also increase the diplomatic weight you get from every ship, along with reducing how much they cost you from an economic perspective, both to build and to upkeep. The last part here is that you will unlock the supremacist diplomatic stance, which, if you have a military, is the best diplomatic stance in the entire game from a diplomatic weight perspective, and you also get the war doctrines policy. War doctrines offer massive boosts to your fleet in the mid and late game. Depending on your ethics and civics, they might offer better, but war doctrines are a necessity if you want to stand toe-to-toe with other empires in military engagements. Traditions have a large effect on your empire, but are generally quite generic. Almost every empire type can take all of the traditions. But what if we had a very specialized empire with some very specific bonuses right at the start of the game? How would that affect things? If you'd like to know more about empire origins and how powerful and weak they are, click the video on screen now.